Hello, welcome to this webinar on understanding the St. Francis Fund application. I'm David Schreier, and for those of you who don't know me, I've worked with Felician Sisters of North America for several years. My firm is a boutique consulting firm located in Chicago, and our mission is to help community-based organizations find the right paths and solutions forward. We work with a number of different nonprofit organizations and arts, social service, religion, associations, and foundations. And we also have a very diverse base of local, national, and international clients. The scope of our work is helping organizations develop their capacity. And as you can see from this image, we assist organizations with fundraising, planning, marketing, communications, bringing the right people on board, and doing evaluations and assessments. And this is a useful image for any leaders watching this webinar to give some thought to your ministry and how complete are the wheels for your organization. Are there any segments missing that are worth looking at? Today we're going to look at the details of the St. Francis Fund application. You might say that this is a webinar on the nitty-gritty of the application, because Felician Services wants to make sure that any ministries that apply for funding can put together the most thorough, comprehensive, and compelling application and get the highest level of funding available. So there are some slight changes to the application this year. We're going to walk through all the key questions that you need to answer and probe a little bit and dig into exactly what's being asked. So first we'll start by covering a couple of the philosophical elements of the guidelines for St. Francis Fund, and then we'll look at specific questions on the application, and along the way consider particular approaches to providing information most meaningfully. This will not only help ministries prepare their St. Francis Fund application, but as they look beyond to private foundations, community foundations, corporate foundations in the community, you'll all have a better sense of what information is required and how to put it together. So I want to highlight, first of all, the vision statement from the St. Francis Fund guidelines. In the upper right, you can see that it says, Felician Services, Inc. will be a catalyst for innovation and positive change, collaborating with ministry leadership to identify and empower religious and laity in sustaining ministries in the Felician Sisters' heritage. And I just want to highlight in particular a couple of elements of that, particularly the word catalyst that was used. A catalyst is something that brings quick action, quick change, and that's really the intent of the St. Francis Fund application, that there is a startup quality to projects and programs that get funded, and that there will be relatively immediate results that can be seen in 1 or 2 years. And so this isn't a long-term 20-year approach to program design and development. This is much shorter of a time frame to show results. The overall purpose of the St. Francis Fund is severalfold. First, to provide financial assistance in developing positive initiatives to address unmet or undermet community needs. And as you may recall from previous workshops, we talk a little bit about the word positive, and what does that say about the tone of your plan, project, or program? What does that say about the particular approach you might bring to your St. Francis Fund application? This is certainly an opportunity to introduce a fresh program idea, new approaches, new creative ways of looking at community needs. This most definitely is not a funding opportunity simply for operations to continue things that are already in place. Another bit of language in the St. Francis Fund guidelines talks about discovery, that the fund is committed to discovering the unmet needs of the community. And so again, when you hear the word discovery, there's an element of curiosity, of investigation, of fresh approaches. So these are just things for you to keep in mind as you're shaping your application, so that you don't merely repackage an existing program or project and just tie it up with a different bow, but that you really are entering into this application process with the understanding that this is a new, positive, fresh idea. And so it'll be important along the way that the language in your application reflects the spirit and the intent of St. Francis application as well. So it's not merely interspersing the words positive and discovering and so forth, but making sure that your application embodies the overall intent. And so let me also add that because of its emphasis on funding new approaches, the St. Francis Fund Evaluation Committee is going to look particularly at ministries that come up with fresh programs and project ideas rather than simply seeking funding for existing operations programs. One of the first questions that you come to on the St. Francis Fund application has to do with identifying the problem in the community, the particular need in the community. And this is a very important part of the application. It actually lays the foundation for the entire application. And so if your problem statement or need statement is weak, so will the rest of your proposal be. The problem statement or need statement essentially expresses why this project is necessary. So you're spelling out clearly what the unmet or the undermet needs in the community are and how your particular project will address them. And how will it help close the gap in the community? It's an opportunity for you in your application to indicate why you feel your project is significant and the difference that it will make in the community. Another way of answering that question is what would not get done in the community if your project were not to be funded? Whenever you're putting together a problem statement or need statement, it's very helpful to have supporting data that documents community needs in a fact-based way. So we're not going on gut or intuition in terms of what are the needs out there and what are the problems, but it's very important to gather primary data and or secondary data to substantiate your application. And so just as a reminder, primary data has to do with doing your own research, and that may come from doing surveys or interviews or analysis of information that your ministry already collects. And secondary data refers to using the research that others have done. And it could be that local community governments have done research or associations or other nonprofits. And so you can draw on primary and secondary data to bolster your application. Essentially, you need to show that you really know what the problem is and you understand the root of that problem. So here's an example of a problem statement. Breast cancer kills, but statistics provide that regular checkups catch most breast cancer in the early stages, reducing the likelihood of death. Sangamon County has the fewest number of breast detection programs per capita, 1 per 1,000. This same county's own data shows that it has a disproportionately high incident rate of breast cancer, 6%, particularly among minority groups. Hence, a program to encourage preventive checkups will reduce the risk of death due to breast cancer. So you can see in this particular sample, I used statistical information and talked about the significant need for a particular programmatic intervention. To give you a sense of a couple of other program statements, press pause as you're viewing this presentation right now and take a few minutes to review excerpts from the two proposals provided to you. There's a problem statement on pages 294 and 295 of the Diabetes Association proposal, and there's a needs statement on page 2 of the Easter Seals proposal. And just a couple of more comments about problem statements and need statements. When you're using hard data, it's important to cite your sources. For example, United States 2010 Census information, or New York Times, or Chicago Department of Health and Human Services, to further build credibility for your claims and what you're putting forth in your application. It's also very helpful in this part of the application to address why the problem is occurring and provide some context and maybe explain some of the contributing causes that are underlying a particular problem or need. For example, 5 years ago, the manufacturing sector in the community disintegrated. Companies either moved locations or closed operations, throwing thousands of people out of work. These struggling families have had a hard time making ends meet, and today they represent many of our food pantry's clients. So we put into context the client base for a particular ministry. Finally, it's important to talk about why you want to address this need at this time, given all the other serious needs in the community. What's most compelling for right now? Another question on the St. Francis Fund application asks you to explain how your project idea is a new and positive initiative. And as you go about describing how it is, I just want to suggest a few things that you might want to work in. First, to highlight the background of the staff or board members who will be involved with this particular project. Why are they the right ones to help implement a new and positive initiative? If you have a previous track record of starting new programs, this is also an opportunity for you to highlight your success there. Overall, you'll want to establish credibility and build confidence in the application evaluators that if you're given this grant, you will be able to start up, implement, and sustain this idea. Overall, you want to give the application readers a sense of hope that you have a workable approach to a very difficult challenge. The next area of the application asks you about project design for your idea. And this is the part of the application where you'll address goals for your particular idea. And goals generally are broad, abstract descriptions that talk about the purpose of this program altogether. But underlying those goals, you will need to substantiate your application with several objectives, which will be measurable and accomplishable aspects of the overall program. These will be tangible descriptions that will communicate how you will achieve this overall project in the time that's allotted. The project design portion of the application also gives you an opportunity to talk about the methods for your project. This is the area where you'll be able to talk about the who, what, where, when, why, and how for your idea, and essentially explain how the whole thing comes together, how the whole thing happens. So who will be in charge of doing the work, and what's going to be happening, and where is it going to be happening, and how will it get done by the end of one fiscal year's worth of funding. So here's an example of project design goal and objectives. For an after-school mentoring program, the goal would be to improve the reading scores for children participating in an after-school mentoring program. There are two objectives. Objective one is our remedial education program will assist 50 inner-city elementary school children by improving their reading score by 1 grade. And the second objective is, through growing confidence in their comprehension skills, students will increase the number of hours they study on their own each week by 25%. So again, you can see that there are specific and measurable indicators here that can be tracked and in fact will have to be tracked if the project is funded. So for your particular idea, you may have several goals, and each of those goals may have several objectives. And to give you an opportunity to look at another couple of samples of goals and objectives, you can press pause once more and review the statement of objective on pages 6 through 9 of the Easter Seals proposal. It's important in the project design portion that you're making clear the solution that you have to a problem. So as you explain what you plan to do with the grant that's given, you'll need to substantiate that you've looked at this problem from all angles. In your language, it's important not to include jargon or acronyms, but that you explain your project idea as if to someone who knows nothing about the field. The project design section is also where you tie the whole project together. So how do the objectives and strategies and staffing and plan and timeline all seamlessly fit? That needs to come clear in this portion of the application. And finally, it's important to explain why you feel your particular approach to solving a problem in the community is the right one. On what do you base that sense, that feeling? Is it because other methods have been tried that didn't work? Is it because the approach you're putting forth is regarded as best practice in the field? So take the opportunity to talk about why you believe your design is the right design to address the problem. Now let's talk about impact. This is a very important part of any grant proposal. It's where an organization describes the anticipated program results and their intended impacts or outcomes. In other words, what difference will your project make in the lives of clients or in the community at large or with other stakeholders that may be participating? So again, it's an opportunity to be specific and use measurable indicators to talk about impact. There are many different types of things you can measure or describe in terms of impact. You could look at client participation rates, community support, client feedback, client satisfaction. There might be decreases in certain undesirable types of behavior. There may be increases in certain types of desirable behavior. You could look at the levels of depression or the reduction in bed scores or the number of job placements. So as you think about your particular project, consider what can be evaluated, what can be measured, so that as time marches on over the course of the year, you'll be able to know if you're on track or not. So I just mentioned evaluation, and that's a very important part of this process as well. How will you know if your project is successful unless you're measuring and evaluating certain things along the way? So it's important to decide what you will evaluate before your program even begins. Anyone can make claims about what their program is going to do, but you'll need to show that you have a way of getting there, and you'll know if there are certain course corrections along the way that need to be made because you're watching things very closely. And so in the impact and evaluation portion of your application, it's an opportunity for you to look at qualitative or numbers-based types of information and quantitative or impression-based, observation-based types of data. But you'll have to think about what it is that you're going to track and monitor at least over the course of 1 year, and hopefully longer, because the goal is to not just have a lot of one-year projects, but to have sustainable programs over time. And you'll have to look at the variables that you might want to consider before the program intervention, during the program intervention, at the end of program intervention. An evaluation could be done in many different ways. You could be doing surveys and interviews and, again, analysis of existing house data that you have, results and scores and visits and so forth. And what are the things you'd evaluate? It's all those items we just covered a moment ago: client participation, client feedback, and so forth. Another aspect of impact and evaluation is the use of benchmarks. And you can think of benchmarks as mileposts along the roadside to let you know if you're on track and you're heading in the right direction, or if certain changes need to be made. For example, you might say that you expect a 10% increase in the number of new support group participants who come each quarter. But after some initial hitting these targets, things flatten out and things plateau. and you're not hitting these numerical goals quarter after quarter. So how will you learn from the results of your program at any particular point in time and make the necessary changes? For example, you may learn that new support group members only come once or twice, but then they start feeling intimidated by people who've been coming for a long time, and so they stop coming. And that's an opportunity for you, because you've got some benchmarks in place to realize that certain course corrections are needed. Another aspect of the application asks you to look at the population that will be served if your project gets funded. And this is an opportunity for you to think about who will be affected directly and indirectly by your program intervention. And to what extent are individuals and families affected by the problem that you're going to address? So beyond merely giving numbers of total people who will be served, this is an opportunity for you to describe the qualities and the characteristics of the people that will become part of your program or project. For example, are these people who are below the poverty level, undocumented and unemployed individuals, or are they elderly, alone, frail seniors with medically complex situations? So richly describe the client base as much as you're able to. So this is an opportunity for you to describe your knowledge about the client community that you're planning to serve. Another important aspect of the application has to do with sustainability. So this is an opportunity for you to share your ideas and plans for, first of all, securing additional funding so that your program or project idea can continue. Maybe it's government support, maybe it's earned income, maybe it's grants from other foundations or individual gifts or contracts. But beyond financial sustainability, you may also want to consider other aspects of sustainability. For example, you may find that for every 5 clients that you serve, you need to reach out to 50 initially. And so that speaks to marketing sustainability and what are you going to do to propel the marketing efforts for your initiative. Or you may realize that you need a stronger network of medical professionals who will refer clients and patients to your program. So this speaks to a stronger referral network that you'll have to build and sustain over time. So it's not simply funding, but overall, what do you need to do to ensure the life and continuance of this idea? And who are other stakeholders who are important to this project's continued life? They may be collaborators who are partnering with you. It could also be local legislative leaders or business leaders or other agencies in the community. So how do they need to become more involved to help sustain and strengthen your idea? There are also other considerations like additional staffing needs, additional space needs. And so as you look a little bit further down the road, where is it that you are right now? Where is it that you need to be? And how are you going to get there? And finally, in terms of sustainability, any letters of support that you can provide from prospective funders and partners will go a long way to demonstrate to the St. Francis Fund Reviewing Committee that there's a good solid plan and methodology in place. So let's talk now briefly about collaboration. This is another aspect of the St. Francis Fund application that's featured prominently. This is an opportunity for you to highlight any previous experience you have collaborating with Felician Ministries or other nonprofit organizations. As you think about collaborating partners, do you know their experience in addressing the problems that you're undertaking with your idea? So choosing the right partner for the right reasons is very important. I think it's not enough merely to have some names of other entities on your application and say we're collaborating, because the ability that you have to describe the richness and complexity of that collaboration will put you further ahead in the reviewers' minds. So this is a chance for you to explain how and why other partners were chosen for their collaboration. What is it that they're going to be doing that complements the work of your ministry? Or what is it that your ministry is bringing to an undermet need in the community that will involve these other organizations? And this is a chance for you to describe the nature of the collaboration as well. Will you be sharing clients? Will you be sharing staff and board members? Will you both be contributing financially to the partnership? So how are the roles going to be similar and how are the roles different? And finally, what is the collaborator's own experience with new project initiatives? Do they have a track record? Do they have a solid reputation in the community? Do they have experience that will add to your St. Francis Fund application and with funders more generally in the community? Another aspect of the St. Francis Fund application that you are asked to address is how your program or project idea relates to your ministry's strategic plan. So first, dig out that strategic plan and review the key strategic imperatives or priorities that you identified, and then match as many of the strategic plan's imperatives to your program or project ideas goals as well. It's as if we're trying to form the strongest chain, and the more links, the better. So in essence, with your St. Francis Fund application, you're matching it to Felician core values and vision overall. You're matching it to the St. Francis Fund guidelines, and you're matching it to your own ministry's strategic plan. And so to the extent that you can identify all these links, it's like the cherries on the slot machine, bing, 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 bing. Your application will emerge as a good, strong contender. Ministries are also asked to prepare a project budget as part of their St. Francis Fund application. I provided for you a budget template that you can use that will give you a chance to look thoroughly and comprehensively from all angles at your particular idea. And just a couple of notes: if you're able to show multi-year revenue and expense projections, then do so, because again, that will help convey in the mind of the reviewer that this isn't just a one-shot deal, that your goal and intent is for a particular idea to be sustained over time. And be sure not to include anything in your budget that you can't explain, because sometimes when applications are received, a budget justification is asked, and you'll need to document particular expenses and revenue projections. And so you want to be clear that you're including exactly what needs to be included. There are a few required attachments that you'll need to submit as part of your application: your 2014 operating budget, your ministry's strategic plan, a project timeline, a letter of recommendation from your ministry site CEO or CAO, and a letter of recommendation from your ministry designee. Now, there are some optional attachments that you could include as well, and I would encourage you to do so. First, any relevant board or committee rosters, letters of support from collaborating organizations, and sample evaluation tools that you plan to use over the course of your project. Finally, the St. Francis Fund guideline document talks about the specific criteria that will be used to evaluate grants. And it will be very helpful for you to review these criteria and be sure that you're addressing them in some form or fashion in your St. Francis Fund application. Ideally, your application will meet all of the criteria to be considered a strong and competitive application. So thank you very much, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or need some clarification. Best of luck.